When the ruthless vampire king finds his human maid in tears, his single question, "Who hurt you?" shatters centuries of cold indifference. As he hunts the one who broke her, he is forced to confront his own buried pain, revealing a heart more dangerous and tender than any monster's fangs. People say this kingdom was ruled by a monster, but they never saw the way he looked at the smallest, saddest things. This is the night a vampire king asked one human question, and everything he thought he was began to change. The Palace of Nightfall was never truly dark. Silver moonlight spilled through high stained glass windows, painting the marble floors in cold blues and golds. Candles burned in crystal chandeliers, their flames steady and fearful, as if even fire knew better than to flicker in the presence of the vampire king. At the far end of the great hall, on a throne carved from black stone, King Alaric sat in perfect stillness, listening to the heartbeat of his own kingdom. For centuries, people whispered that his heart had stopped long ago. It was easier to believe in a monster than in a ruler who chose restraint over blood, silence over rage. Alaric had fed on criminals and volunteers, never on the innocent, but no one sang songs about that. They spoke instead of his golden eyes that glowed in the dark, and of the way the air grew colder whenever he entered a room. Guests bowed low, servants lowered their gaze, and no one ever dared to cry where he could hear them. All except one. Her name was Liora, the smallest maid in the palace and the only one who sometimes forgot to be afraid. She had arrived with frightened eyes and calloused hands, carrying a woven bracelet from a village Alaric had once ridden past but never entered. She moved quickly, always a little out of breath, always humming some half-remembered tune under her breath. The other servants hissed at her to be quiet, to show more fear, more distance. But some nights, when Alaric walked the silent corridors, he could hear her soft, singing echo between the stone walls, and against his will, something in his chest would ache. He told himself it was only habit, an old reflex from the days when he had been human and music meant family and firelight. He told himself he did not watch the way Liora slipped extra bread to the scullery boy, or how she straightened a crooked painting, and then whispered a shy apology to the long-dead queen in the frame. He ignored how she bowed when he passed, not out of empty fear, but with a strange, quiet respect, as if she saw more than his fangs and his reputation. On the night everything changed, rain beat against the palace windows like 1,000 impatient fingers. Council had run late, and Alaric's patience had run thin. He had listened to lords argue about borders and taxes while pretending not to hear the throb of a dozen mortal pulses in the room. Kindness took effort. Restraint was a kind of war. By the time the council doors finally closed behind him, his jaw ached from holding back both his irritation and his hunger. He was halfway down the long corridor to his private chambers when he heard it. A sound so small it almost wasn't there, a muffled sob quickly bitten down. To anyone else it would have been swallowed by the storm outside. But to Alaric, every sound in his castle was a thread, and this one tugged hard at his attention. He stopped, head turning slightly, listening. There it was again, a shaky breath, the faint rustle of fabric against cold stone, the quick, panicked flutter of a human heartbeat. The monster in the stories might have smiled at that. The real Alaric felt only a sharp stab of worry. He followed the sound around a corner, footsteps silent, long cloak trailing like spilled shadow behind him. At the end of a narrow servants' passage, where torchlight barely reached, he found her. Liora was pressed against the wall beside a tall window, half hidden behind heavy curtains. Her white maid's cap was crooked, her cheeks streaked with tears that shone in the dim light. One hand clutched the wooden window frame, the other wrapped around her own ribs as if she were trying to hold herself together. She did not notice him at first. Her eyes were shut tight, her breathing shaky and uneven. He smelled rain through the glass, wax from the torches, and beneath it all, a faint, sharp trace of blood. Not much, but enough to tell him something had happened. Enough to wake every instinct he had spent a lifetime disciplining. "Liora!" His voice came out low and cool, but softer than the one he used in the throne room. Her eyes flew open. For a heartbeat, fear flooded her face, raw and bright, the way most humans looked at him. Then something else flickered there, surprise, confusion, and she dropped into a clumsy curtsy, almost losing her balance. "Why, Your Majesty, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be in the way. I was just—" She broke off with a tiny gasp as the movement sent a stab of pain through her side. Alaric was in front of her before he had time to think about it. One moment he stood by the corridor's mouth. The next he was close enough to see every trembling eyelash, to count the freckles scattered across her nose. The speed of his own movement startled him. He forced himself to slow, to breathe, to be gentle. He did not touch mortals if he could help it. Their warmth burned against his cold skin, a dangerous, intoxicating contrast. But now, seeing the way she fought to stay upright, the way her fingers dug into her own arm, he raised his hands and very carefully framed her face with his palms. Her skin was warm and damp from tears. Her breath hitched as she looked up at him, and for a moment he hated that she had every right to be afraid. His thumbs rested just below her ears, nowhere near the pulse at her throat, leaving that fragile place untouched out of sheer will. "Who hurt you?" he asked. The words surprised them both. He had meant to say, "What happened?" or "Compose yourself." Something distant, something kingly. But what came out was simple, human, and heavy with a concern he had never planned to show. Liora stared at him, eyes wide and shining. Up close, he could see a faint redness along her jaw, as if fingers had gripped her there too tightly. Her lower lip trembled, but not from cold. The scent of fear was sharp in the air, but under it he caught something else, trust, bruised but still alive, like a candle still fighting in the wind. "I'm fine, Your Majesty," she whispered, the lie thin as glass. "It's nothing. I just slipped on the stairs. I'm clumsy, you know that." Alaric's gaze lowered to her hands. A small smear of blood darkened the edge of her sleeve, too high for a fall, too precise to be an accident. His eyes darkened, not with hunger, but with anger held under tight control. His voice, when he spoke again, was softer still, but it carried the weight of a throne. "Do not lie to me, little one, not about this." Something in the way he said it seemed to crack the last of her defenses. Her shoulders sagged. Her eyes filled again. When she spoke, her words came out in a rush, like water escaping a broken dam. "If I tell you, you'll be angry," she said. "And when you're angry, people are afraid. And when people are afraid, they do worse things. I don't want anyone else to be hurt because of me." The idea stunned him. All his life, his long, unnatural, tangled life, people had warned their children of his temper, of his power, of the terrible things he could do. No one had ever spoken to him as if his anger might spread like a sickness, hurting not just the guilty, but the innocent too. No one, until now, had been more worried about the chain of fear than about their own pain. "You are not a burden," Alaric said, the words careful, as if he were tasting them for the first time. "And no one in this castle has the right to lay a hand on you in cruelty, not while you serve under my roof. Understand this, Liora. My power exists to protect, not to frighten the weak." Her eyes searched his face, as if she were trying to decide whether to believe a legend could speak like that. Up close, he knew what she saw: the ageless skin, the sharp lines of his cheekbones, the unnatural glow beneath his eyes. A predator's face speaking a healer's promise. It was almost ridiculous. It was also, he realized with a quiet shock, the truest thing he had said in years. Slowly, Liora nodded. Her fingers loosened around the fabric of her dress. Her voice, when it came, was very small. "Will you promise me something, Your Majesty?" "Ask," he said. "If I tell you who did this," she whispered, "promise you won't just destroy him and forget about everyone else. Promise you'll listen first. Please, I don't want revenge, I just want it to stop." Alaric had faced armies without flinching. He had watched decades pass like seasons. Yet this simple request, spoken with wet lashes and shaking hands, felt heavier than any sword. In that moment, he saw it clearly. the path the monster in the stories would take. He would fly into a rage, hunt down the culprit, make a clear and terrible example. The kingdom would sleep easier, perhaps, but fear would grow deeper roots, and no one would learn anything but how much it hurt to displease their king. Or he could do something harder. He could be deliberate, he could be just, he could be kind. "I promise to listen," he said at last. "I promise to seek truth, not just blood, and I promise that whatever I do next will make this castle safer, not more afraid. That is my word as your king." Something bright and painful flickered across her face. Relief, gratitude, and a strange, fragile warmth that made her look, for a heartbeat, unafraid of him at all. It struck him like sunlight through a shuttered window. His hands, still holding her face, suddenly felt too aware of the softness of her skin, of the living heat pulsing beneath it. He pulled back a little, careful not to startle her, and let his hands fall to his sides. "Now," he said quietly, "tell me who hurt you." Liora swallowed hard. Her throat worked as she tried to find her courage. Outside, thunder rolled over the mountains, rattling the window panes. The torches along the corridor hissed and flickered as a draft slid through the stone, carrying the smell of wet earth and something else, something metallic and sour that Alaric did not like. She leaned closer, almost on instinct, as if the space between them felt safer than the shadows behind her. Her voice was barely a breath. "Your Majesty," she whispered, eyes darting past his shoulder for the briefest second. "He's still here. He's watching us right now." Alaric's blood went cold, colder than it already was. Very slowly, he turned his head toward the dark end of the corridor where her gaze had flicked. At that exact moment, a sudden gust of wind slammed against the windows, and every torch along the passage blew out at once, plunging them into a darkness so complete that only his golden eyes could pierce it. In that black, breathless silence, with Leora's hand clutching his sleeve and an unseen enemy lurking just beyond the edge of human sight, the vampire king realized this was no simple act of cruelty. Someone in his own castle was hunting in the shadows, and for the first time in 100 years, Alaric was not sure whether he was the predator or the prey. The king in the dark. Darkness dropped over the corridor like a heavy cloak, swallowing the last trace of torchlight. The storm outside roared louder, as if the sky itself had taken a sharp breath. Leora's fingers tightened in the fabric of Alaric's sleeve, the smallness of her grip a sharp contrast to the vast black around them. Alaric did not need light. The dark had been his companion for centuries. His eyes adjusted almost at once, golden irises capturing the faintest shreds of glow that slipped under doors and around corners. The world sharpened into shades of silver and shadow. He could see the curve of Leora's cheek, the terror in her wide eyes, the rise and fall of her chest. He could feel the tremor in her bones through the thin fabric between his arm and her hand. "Stay behind me," he murmured. His voice was calm, but inside, something older and colder uncurled. A protective instinct he rarely allowed himself to feel this strongly pressed hard against his ribs. This was his castle, his home. No one should be able to stalk his corridors and terrorize his servants under his very nose. He lifted his head and listened. There, a footstep, the soft scrape of leather on stone, far down the corridor where the torches had gone out. The sound was deliberate, not the clumsy trip of a frightened servant. Slow, confident, too confident. "Show yourself," Alaric called into the dark, every word clear and steady. "You are in the presence of your king." For a moment, silence. Then a low chuckle drifted toward them, not cruel exactly, but sure of itself in a way that made Alaric's jaw tighten. "So the legends are true," a man's voice said. "You really can see in the dark." Liora flinched at the sound. Her hand slipped from Alaric's sleeve, and he felt her try to press herself into the wall, as if she wanted to disappear inside it. Alaric took a slow step forward, placing his body fully between her and the voice. His cloak brushed the floor in a controlled sweep. He kept his hands loose at his sides, palms open, a quiet promise to himself that this would not end in mindless violence unless there was no other choice. "Step into the light," he said, "or I will bring the light to you." "Light," the voice answered. "In Nightfall Palace. Forgive me, your majesty, I thought darkness was your truest friend." A flare of irritation sparked in Alaric's chest, not at the words themselves, but at the familiarity. This was not a stranger. This was someone who felt bold enough to joke in front of his king, even while hiding. He snapped his fingers. Tiny flames flickered back to life in the nearest torches, then leapt one by one down the corridor, chasing away the dark. The storm outside still growled, but inside, warm gold spread along the stone until the shadows that remained had nowhere comfortable to hide. Liora made a small sound behind him. At the far end of the passage stood Captain Edric. He was tall for a human, his soldier's posture straight and clean. Chainmail glinted beneath his dark cloak, and the hilt of his sword rose over one shoulder. A thin scar crossed his eyebrow, a mark from a battle Alaric half remembered. Edric had served the palace for 10 loyal years. Alaric had trusted him with the night watch, with the keys to the outer gates, with the safety of everyone who slept under his roof. Now he leaned casually against the wall as if nothing were wrong, as if the trembling maid and the extinguished torches were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "Your Majesty," Edric said with a respectful nod, "I didn't realize you were inspecting this wing." Alaric's gaze dropped just for a heartbeat to the captain's right hand. The knuckles were reddened as if from a recent impact, not bloodied, not broken, but used. Behind him, Liora sucked in a breath. "Captain Edric," Alaric replied, "you are far from the outer ramparts. Explain yourself." Edric pushed away from the wall, walking toward them, his boots ringing lightly on the stone. His eyes flicked to Liora, and something cold passed through them, annoyance, maybe, or calculation. Liora shrank back, half hiding behind Alaric's shoulder. "I heard there was trouble in the servants' hall," Edric said. "Discipline issues, laziness, whispering past curfew. I took it upon myself to restore order. The staff responds better when they remember who holds authority in this place." His mouth curved in something that tried to be a smile. "With respect, of course, your Majesty." Alaric listened not only to his words, but to the rhythms beneath them. Edric's heartbeat was steady, too steady, like a man used to lying without consequence. His jaw was relaxed. No shame scent clung to him. Only iron, sweat, and the faintest trace of Leora's floral soap on his sleeve. Leora's voice came out thin, but surprisingly firm. "You grabbed me," she said, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere near his boots. "You said if I dropped another tray, you'd make sure I never worked again. You said no one would care if a useless maid disappeared." Edric's expression did not change, but a flicker of impatience passed through his eyes. "Exaggerations," he said. "Words to frighten a girl into doing her job properly. I never laid a serious hand on you, Liora. You bruise easily, and I have the whole palace to keep in line." Alaric stepped aside just enough for Liora to see his face. "Look at me," he said softly. It took her a moment to lift her gaze. When she did, he saw the same mixture of fear and fragile hope he had seen when she first arrived. He also saw something new there now, anger. Not the loud, wild anger that burned everything it touched. A quieter, sharper kind that refused to disappear. "Is that how it happened?" Alaric asked. She nodded. "He's been doing it for months," she whispered. "Not just to me, to the kitchen boy, to the laundry girls, to the stable hands. He says if we complain, no one will listen because you want the servants afraid. He says we should be grateful he doesn't do worse because you could." The words hit Alaric harder than any blade. He had expected cruelty, perhaps, pride. A captain who believed himself above the people he was meant to protect. But this twisting of Alaric's own name into a weapon against the weak, this reached deeper. For years, he had allowed the myths to stand. Let them whisper about the ruthless King of Nightfall. Let them tremble and keep their distance. Fear was easier than trust. It kept people from trying to test his patience or his hunger. It kept them safe, he told himself. But in the crack between what he was and what they thought he was, men like Edric had found space to thrive. "Captain," Alaric said slowly, "did you tell my servants that my will was for them to live in fear of my temper?" Edric's mouth tightened. "I told them the truth," he said. "Order is built on fear, you know that, your majesty. You founded this kingdom on the battlefield. People obey when they're afraid of consequences. I simply applied your principles in the lower halls. You don't have time to manage every loose tongue. I did it for you." "For me," Alaric repeated, voice soft as falling ash. The corridor felt suddenly smaller. The torches seemed too bright, throwing every crack in the stone into harsh relief. In the corner of his mind, he heard echoes of his own past, shouted commands, the clash of steel, the wet thud of bodies on muddy ground. He remembered the day he decided he would not rule like that forever. He had changed, but he had never told his people that he had. Liora's fingers brushed his cloak again, a tiny, unconscious plea for reassurance. Alaric's next words were for her as much as for Edric. "Fear may force obedience," he said, "but it does not build loyalty. It does not earn respect, and it does not create a kingdom that can stand when I am gone." Edric's face darkened. "With respect, your majesty, you will not be gone. You're eternal. Mortals need a firm hand. If they are not afraid of you, they will become careless. They will forget who keeps them safe from what lurks beyond these walls." Liora spoke before Alaric could answer. "We are already afraid," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "But not of him, of you." She pointed at Edric, then let her hand fall. "Of the men who use his name to hurt us and then tell us it's for our own good." Her courage silenced the corridor more effectively than any shout could have. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Alaric took a slow breath and let his decision form fully before he spoke. Power had always been a blade in his hands. Tonight, he would see if it could be a scalpel instead. "Captain Edric," he said, "you will come with me. Now, you and Liora both. We will speak in my council chamber, and we will find the truth of this. If there are others who act as you do, I will know their names. If there is more to this than a captain who has forgotten compassion, I will uncover it." Edric's jaw flexed. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. "Your Majesty, with all respect, is it wise to bring a servant into council matters? She's emotional, frightened. She will say whatever makes her feel safe." Alaric turned his head, just enough to meet Liora's eyes once more. "She is already not safe," he said. "That is why I am listening to her." He extended his arm, not to take her hand, but to offer his presence as a shield. Liora hesitated, then stepped closer to his side. Not behind him this time, beside him. Together, with Edric walking a careful 2 paces behind, they moved through the corridors toward the heart of the palace. The storm outside rolled on, lightning briefly painting the stained glass with ghostly light. Servants they passed stopped and stared, faces filled with confusion and a sudden, fragile hope. It was not every night that they saw their king walking like this, with a maid at his side and his own captain trailing like a suspect. As they approached the heavy doors of the council chamber, Alaric felt something shift in the air. A pressure, a prickle at the back of his neck that had nothing to do with the weather. He had lived too long to ignore that sensation. He pushed the doors open. Candlelight burst over rows of empty seats and polished stone. The chamber should have been silent at this hour. Instead, a single figure stood by the tall window, back turned, cloak trailing. Alaric recognized the silhouette at once. Lord Malachar, his oldest advisor. His voice slid across the room like silk dipped in ice. "You move quickly, my king," Malachar said, without turning. I wondered how long it would take you to notice what has been happening under your very nose." Leora's breath caught. Edric's shoulders stiffened. And in that instant, Alaric understood that Captain Edric's cruelty was not the whole story at all. It was only the first thread in something much darker, woven deep into the fabric of his reign. Promises and plots. The council chamber doors closed behind them with a soft, final thud, shutting out the storm and sealing in the tension. Dozens of candles burned along the walls, their light reflecting off the polished surface of the long table where laws had been written, wars ended, and alliances forged. Tonight, that same table felt like an altar waiting for truth. Lord Malachar turned slowly from the window. His appearance was immaculate, as always dark hair pulled back with a silver clasp, long coat falling in straight, elegant lines, a ring heavy with crimson stone on his finger. Unlike Alaric, Malachar never tried to soften the sharpness of his vampire nature. His eyes were a deep, polished amber, cold and still as frozen honey. He inclined his head. "Your Majesty, Captain young Liora." He spoke her name as if tasting it, each syllable too smooth. Liora instinctively moved closer to Alaric. He did not step away. "Explain," Alaric said. He did not sit on the high seat at the head of the table. Instead, he remained standing, level with everyone else. Power did not always need height to be felt. Malachar's gaze drifted to Edric, then to the faint redness along Leora's jaw, then back to Alaric. "You have discovered," he said, "a fraction of what your people endure. I am almost impressed it took this long." Blood hummed in Alaric's ears, though his own heart did not beat. "Do not play with your words tonight, old friend," he said. "Did you know my captain used my name to frighten and hurt my servants?" Malachar's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "I advised him to maintain order," he replied. "As I have always advised you, a kingdom must be guided by a firm hand. Your mercy grows softer every year, Alaric. I feared the lower ranks might mistake your restraint for weakness." "So you told them I wanted fear," Alaric said quietly. "I reminded them what you are," Malachar answered just as quietly. "A predator in a velvet cloak is still a predator, or have you forgotten?" Leora's voice came out before Alaric could stop it. "He's not just that," she said. The words trembled, but they were clear. "He listens, he keeps his promises. He could have destroyed Edric in the corridor, but he didn't." Malachar's eyes flicked to her, cool and assessing. "Ah," he murmured. "So this is the girl, the one who believes the monster has a heart." Liora flushed but lifted her chin. "He's my king," she said, "and you're supposed to help him protect us, not give people permission to hurt us." Edric shifted uneasily. For the first time since the corridor, uncertainty softened his posture. The confidence that had carried him while he justified his actions now looked thinner, almost embarrassed. "Lord Malachar only told me to keep order," Edric said, sounding like a soldier clinging to a broken shield. "He never told me to go that far." Liora stared at him. "You didn't have to," she said. "You chose to." The words landed between them like something heavy and true. Edric's gaze dropped to the floor. Alaric moved to the head of the table, not to sit, but to place both hands flat on the polished wood. "Enough," he said. "We will not drown in half-truths and shared blame. Captain Edric, you will speak first, all of it. When did this begin? Who else is involved? And why exactly was Liora your chosen target tonight?" Edric swallowed hard. His shoulders straightened, the old soldier in him wrestling with the newly awakened conscience. "After the border wars ended, Your Majesty," he began, voice low, "there was confusion. Men trained for battle had no more battles to fight. Discipline slipped in the barracks, fights, drink, laziness. Lord Malachar said your softer laws were making everyone forget who you really are." Malachar did not deny it. "He said," Edric continued, "that fear holds a kingdom together better than love ever will. that if the common folk were not kept in line, they would rise against you the moment they believed you vulnerable. I believed him. He has advised you since before I was born, so I took his words as law. I thought, his voice cracked for the first time, I thought I was preserving your legacy. Alaric felt the weight of each word. The mistake was not one night, not one bruised jaw. It was years of silent myths, of half-true stories left uncorrected. He had wanted to be distant to protect them. Instead, he had given others room to weaponize his distance. And Liora, he pressed gently, why her? Edric's gaze flicked to her, then away. Shame finally colored his cheeks. Because she wasn't afraid enough, he admitted. She laughed while she worked, sang in the halls, treated this place like it was safe. Lord Malachar said there was danger in that kind of spirit. That softness spreads, that soon others would forget to fear, so I. You tried to make me small, Liora finished, her voice barely more than a breath. So I would fit into your idea of what keeps him safe. The room went very quiet. Alaric looked at Malachar. Is this what you meant to create? He asked. A kingdom where courage is punished because it makes fear harder to control. Malachar studied him with cool patience. You speak of courage, he said, but you forget history. You spent centuries building your name on terror so your enemies would not dare invade. Now you want to build it on tenderness. The world outside these walls has not grown kinder, Alaric. It is watching, waiting, if they smell weakness. Kindness is not weakness, Liora said suddenly. Both immortals turned to her. She blinked but did not lower her gaze. I come from a village that no one remembers, she said. Bandits attacked us one winter. They took what they wanted because they thought no one powerful cared about us. They were wrong. A patrol from this castle came. They didn't burn the bandits' camp. They didn't crush our village to teach a lesson. They fed us, gave us blankets, helped rebuild the well. The soldiers wore your crest, your majesty. People in my village still tell that story when the nights get cold. Her eyes shone. That is why I came here to work, not because I was afraid of you, because I believed the king whose men helped us would be like that. Her simple words struck deeper than any argument Malachar or Edric had offered. Alaric remembered that winter, the snow black with ash, the smell of smoke and fear. He had been younger then, in vampire years. He had ridden out ready to make an example, to show the region what happened to those who preyed on the defenseless. But when he had seen the children huddled in doorways, their eyes too tired for tears, something inside him had broken. He had chosen to help instead of avenge. Then he had moved on, believing history would forget the moment as quickly as he did. He had been wrong. You call that softness, he said to Malachar. I call it a different kind of strength. A strength that ends with you alone on a throne of dust, Malachar replied. I will not watch that happen. So yes, I have whispered in soldiers' ears. Yes, I have reminded them what you are capable of. I would rather they fear you and keep this kingdom safe than love you and watch it fall. Liora stepped forward, the smallest person in the room and in that moment the bravest. You keep talking about fear like it's a shield, she said. But you're not the one feeling it. We are. We go to sleep wondering who will be angry tomorrow, who will use your name as an excuse. That's not safety. That's walking on broken glass. Edric flinched at her words. Malachar's face remained perfectly calm, but his ringed hand tightened on the back of a chair until the wood creaked. Alaric let the silence stretch until every breath in the room seemed to echo. I will not rule a kingdom of broken glass, he said at last. He straightened, feeling the full weight of his crown even without the metal on his head. Captain Edric, he went on, you are relieved of duty until further notice. You will remain within the palace under guard. You will not command, you will not discipline, and you will not approach a single servant without my permission. During that time, you will work among those you once frightened. You will carry water, sweep floors, and listen more than you speak. Consider it an education in the lives you damaged. Edric's eyes widened. You're not exiling me. Exile would be simpler, Alaric said, and it would teach you nothing. I want you to understand the weight of the fear you used so casually. That will hurt more than any punishment I could invent." A strange mix of relief and dread crossed Edric's face. He bowed his head slowly for the first time without pride. "As you command, Your Majesty," he said, voice thick. Alaric turned to Malachar. "And you,